Hello, everyone. Welcome back. My name is Leanne Moody, and I am an intuitive voice for higher thought, multidimensional voice for higher thought. Took us a long time to come up with that name. Been working on that since about 2009, but I've been doing this kind of work now for over 30 years, and I'm really happy that you decided to join in today and listen up. I am using this platform as a way to support you and all of us in understanding that we are growing and evolving, and that realizing our abilities, emotional intelligence, and gifts are expanding as we expand. And with that said, I'm just very, very honored to be a bridge for those of you who are just now understanding that, and to also be a colleague and an associate for a lot of you who've already been down this road and need some support. I like to use my soul and my soul's journey to put out there with stories and information that can support you in seeing your own soul and your own journey. And so, with that said, I also like to tell you that I do offer sessions and readings. And if you ever need any help or support, you can go onto my website and find me, 1000faces.net. And in the interim, or if always, just come in here and leave us some communication and offer some insight whenever you have it. And just grateful to be working with all of you again. And I say again because I feel like we've probably done this a few times. Um, yeah, so here we go. What I want to talk to you about today is an ongoing narrative a little bit about realizing that there are no accidents or coincidences, that things are happening around us that we're not paying attention to. We're paying attention to things when they don't feel good, and we're attaching to things when they are painful, but we're not really paying attention to the cool things that are happening day to day in our lives that then show up in other ways. And I wanted to tell you about as I've given sessions over the years, one of the funny things that started happening for me was that when I would start to get ready before a session for a client was arriving, I would have these like weird views about what I wanted to wear that day. Well, I've always been like that. I'm very, very much tuned into what I wear based on my mood. It's more of an artist sense of putting on art as opposed to whether or not I'm going to look like latest fashion. And this particular day, I had gotten up and gotten dressed for a session, and I changed my clothes like 4 times, and didn't realize that when I opened the door, what I had been doing was putting on the same outfit that the person who was coming for the session had on, identical. So that happening one time was one thing. That happening multiple times was another thing. So it got to be a joke with me about whatever I wasn't paying attention until they got there, and I would go, oh my gosh, this is what this was about all morning. I just wasn't aware. So take that to a bigger place and think, years ago, I got up in the middle of the night. My children were still at home at that point. Now they're adults. And my partner at the time, he was asleep. And I got out of bed about 1 in the morning, and I went into my art studio. And I decided to paint. And I like to listen to Boz Scaggs, not the typical Boz Scaggs. I like to listen to his jazz music. He has an album called Speak Low, and it's still one of my very favorites. And so I put on the Speak Low album, and I turned all the lights in the studio up really bright. And so what that does when I would do that was this room we had a lot of windows, and they were reflective. So I could literally see myself in the windows if I paid attention. And I painted and I sang and I danced, and I just had the most amazing night. And I actually got this kind of itch about this quote I had seen in my head, read it in a card, and I was like, oh, I want to paint this whole thing, and then I want to write the quote on it, you know? So I did all of that, and it was just, I don't know how to explain it. It was just an incredibly beautiful time with me on me. And finally finished up around 4:30 or 5, and I went back to bed. And time went on, about a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks later, I got a call from a girl asking for an appointment that someone had referred her. She didn't say why, and I'm like, okay. Sometimes when people would come to see me, they're not coming to talk to a loved one who's crossed over, or another being who's on the other side or anything. Sometimes they are directly doing that. And other times they are coming, it's more for, we have intuitive healing or energetic healing and channeling information for just them to align themselves again in certain ways. It's always all mixed up. It's never just one thing for me. But some people don't come in looking for the mediumship piece at all. Anyway, I didn't know what she was coming for. I just set up the appointment because I don't ask. I don't need to know unless they need to tell me. So she arrives, this is probably 2 or 3 weeks since I did the painting. And she arrives for this appointment. And the appointment, like I said, wasn't made prior to the painting. She gets there and we have this conversation for a little bit. And after a short order, I start to feel like there's someone coming in that's a female. And I bring it up to her that I feel like there's someone here. Would she mind it? Because she hasn't said anything. We're just talking about other stuff and what's going on with her and some transitions she's going through. And she looks at me and she goes, yeah, I do have someone on the other side that I kind of would like to speak to. And I said, well, this is a female. And we started talking about that, and turns out it was her sister. And I was able to understand how her sister passed. And I also understood that some things about her sister, that her sister was showing me herself standing on some rocks and some water, and she kept telling me she was a mermaid. She was a mermaid. And my client acknowledged that, yeah, her sister always laughed and said she felt like she was a mermaid. So we had that straight. And then a bunch of other things came in, and we worked around all of that and some of the potent issues that had happened prior to her getting sick and passing. And some of that stuff was a little interesting, a little bit, interesting to try and navigate with my client, because at first she was not comfortable that the sister was explaining why some things took place. And then when we got to a certain place, we cleared that all up, and she totally accepted it and went to the, oh my goodness, awe spot. And anyway, we had a really wonderful experience, but several things had happened prior to her arriving as well. One, I had gone and gotten a particular blanket and put it over my healing table that I don't normally use. And then I had gone and gotten all of my crystals, which I don't always have out, and mostly amethyst. I had a bunch of amethyst and some rose quartz, and put them all down the table. We never did get on the table, but they were all there. And then in the session, it was referenced a couple of times. I was explaining to her about a poem, and for her in particular, this made a lot of sense. And I kept talking about not the poem, but actually about the sister, and being reference the poem to give her the understanding what the sister was telling me. But it's about footprints in the sand, and that there's a poem where it says that when working in the realm with Christ, that the reason you only saw one set of footprints was because I was carrying you. So we brought that up, and I referenced that for her with what her sister was saying. There was several other big things that went on. And then we tied it up and she left. And she emailed me and called me the next few days, and she said, there's some things I want you to know. And she said, first of all, this is the picture of my sister's piano, and it's got all the amethyst and rose quartz on it. And at the end of it is a framed print of footprints in the sand. And she said, I didn't want to say all of that to you because I was still processing the understanding of what you were telling me. And she said, my sister always did feel that she was a mermaid, and she showed me a picture of her sister on the rocks exactly as we were talking, except for when I saw her sister, she was very vitally alive talking about it. But there is a picture of her doing that. And for me, it's just like having a conversation with her sister, and the sister referencing these things for me to tell this person. So the final piece that was kind of amazing for me, which is what I really wanted to address, is that She then said, this was in my sister's journal at the end page, and she had written notes all around it that said that how important this was to her. This is her private journal, but it was a poem. And 3 guesses what the poem was. It was the poem I had painted the night 3 weeks prior, and it was hanging on my wall when my client came. She never said a word about it. She said, I saw that and I didn't think I could breathe for a few minutes, and I didn't want to say anything to you. Now, for me, what that means is I didn't realize I was being an intuitive, or I was being a channel, or I was holding a mediumship space at all when I painted that. I didn't even have this client set up yet. And yet I had had one of the most beautiful nights I'd ever had by myself that night. And it always stood out to me. It stood out to me then, it stands out to me now. And so I guess what I want to say is, I need us all, or I don't need us to do anything. I'd like for us all to stop and recognize that there are plenty of times in our life when we're asking or we're actually connecting that we're not even giving it a second thought. We're busy, so busy going, what I don't have, or what's happening here, or I'm caught up in this thought, or trying to push this narrative and going, we don't even see it half the time. And then we'll go, oh, I don't believe in that, or I'm not intuitive. And I'm like, yeah, you are. Yes, you are. It's just time to start taking a step back and breathing and looking at the sky and acknowledging that you've got a life and it's a gift. And and that there's so much more to understand if we'll just soften up and allow our natural flow to take place. I guess what I want to say. So anyway, I ramble. What's new? I'm just really happy rambling with you, and I hope that somehow this helped you to think through a few things or consider some things and recognize what a magical gift you are to all of us, because we are all connected, and we need you to remember, if you can, sure, make the lighten the load for a lot of us if we could all do that. So if you did like this today and you like visiting me and coming to this channel, I truly love having you here. I hope you will like it and share it and subscribe and join us some more. And just remember, I'm here if you need me, and let's just stay connected. And one other thing for you to think about, you might be the only light on your street who even knows that you are one. It's important. Let it shine. No more hiding. Just let it shine, okay? I love you. Thank you for showing up.